So Greg, what do I need to do to, I've clicked share screen. Can you authorize me to share my screen?
Hang on. Do I need to make you a host to do it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so, yeah, okay. Right.
So,
okay. I've made you the host now, so okay. You should be able to do it.
Okay, tell me if you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry guys, just bear with us a minute.
So you should click share screen and then you get to click on the window or screen.
Okay, that's it now.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so let me just do a thing. Sorry, okay guys, sorry about that. Right, I think we're nearly there.
I'm now recording this this webinar now. So okay, this is
brilliant.
being recorded.
So everybody can see that, okay? Yeah? Okay, fantastic. I'll start then. And what a fantastic group. Thank you all for coming. I know some of you and some are new faces, but the people I know, there's a lot of great expertise on the call. So what I'm going to do over the next 10 minutes is present a much shorter version of the talk that I would have given last Saturday at our coalition workshop on transport. And it's based on a series of 9 briefings that myself and my colleague Lynn Sloman from Transport for Quality of Life did for Friends of the Earth last year on the transport policies needed if we're to take the climate science seriously. So this is a very rough, very short overview, but if you want to see the detailed briefings, you can find them at that link there. So first, just to give you some context, transport is the worst performing sector in the UK. It's the only sector, as you can see from this red line, where emissions have gone up since 1990. Every other sector, emissions have gone down. So transport is really the rogue sector. And this is how it breaks down for total transport. Road transport forms the majority of our transport emissions, but let's not forget international aviation, which is a growing, quite significant but growing part of our emissions. I think it's doubled since 1990. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to concentrate on cars, which is the red portion there. So policymakers and government all assume that all we need to do to address transport carbon is to switch to electric cars. But a faster switch is certainly necessary, but it is not sufficient. And I'll explain why. The problem is, because new cars, the current government plan is to ban new diesel and petrol cars by 2040, and they're currently consulting on bringing that forward to 2035. But the problem is, because new cars are only a very small proportion of the fleet, it takes a long time to increase the amount of electric vehicles in the fleet. So even if we bring forward that ban to 2035, by 2030, 70% of the cars and vans on the road will still be fossil fueled. So the majority of the mileage over the next 10 years will still be fossil fueled. And that's why we also need to cut road traffic quite significantly. And we estimate by about 20 to 60% over the next 10 years. So this is an absolutely massive challenge to reduce road traffic by this amount. And it requires transformational change, not incremental change. And it will require restrictions on how much people can drive and fly. And absolutely, we need to make travel without a car easier, more convenient and cheaper. People drive now because there is no alternative in lots of cases, or they can't afford not to. So I'm going to run through very quickly now some of the policy measures that we identified in our briefings that can not only address the climate emergency, but I'm also going to touch on how it can address some of the fallout from the current crisis as well. There are challenges from the current crisis. You know, public transport has fallen off a cliff. There's quite a strong chance that road transport will just bounce back even worse than before once the lockdown is lifted. But there are lots of opportunities too. The government has just started consulting on a decarbonising transport plan. Lots of cities and towns across the world and even in the UK are starting to reallocate road space for walking and cycling. And the surveys that, I think this is one John Beardmore circulated, shows that there is an appetite for radical measures on climate. And there are silver linings like the better air quality as well. So the first step we absolutely have to do is to cancel the 27 billion road programme that the government has got planned for the next 5 years. And is now subject to a legal challenge. Instead of spending that money on measures that will lock in carbon and will lock in increased road traffic, we need to reallocate that to measures that will cut carbon instead. So at the moment, road spending, and that's capital spending, not maintenance, is around 7 to 10 billion pounds a year. We should reallocate that urgently to local authorities for public transport, walking and cycling. And these should be long-term investment deals, 15-year packages, which gives local authorities chance to plan. They can employ staff, you know, build up their capacity because they're all absolutely stretched at the moment. So that 7 to 10 billion a year could be spent, we reckon 4 billion a year for local public transport and an extra 2 billion a year for walking and cycling that will go to local authorities and will stimulate green growth and jobs in local areas. The next thing we need to do is to make active travel an absolute priority, because we've seen the surge in cycling because the roads are safer, and we need to make that permanently. We need to make it permanently safer for walking and cycling after the lockdown. So what we need to do is we need rapid construction of segregated cycleways, and we need to reallocate space for active travel. And we can learn from cities like Seville. In just 4 years, they built 120 kilometres of segregated cycleways, and they increased their active travel mode share to over 40%. And this was in a city that was previously considered too hot to cycle. Copenhagen is also building a very extensive network of what they call segregated cycle superhighways, and these radiate 40 kilometres out from Copenhagen across the country. And if this map was superimposed on Derbyshire, the routes would stretch from Chesterfield to Ashbourne. So we need a similar and this is an example of a segregated cycleway in Copenhagen. We need a similar programme in the UK. We need to build continuous segregated cycle and pedestrian paths along all single carriageway main roads from 15 kilometres out from every town and city, so that we have this very well integrated network and people can cycle to work. Or we could be providing off-road networks like the Derwent Valley cycle route, so there's a safe, pleasant route and people can cycle all the way from Matlock to Derby. At the same time, we should combine this with government grants for electric bikes or e-bikes, which have great potential to replace car trips. Lots of surveys have shown that e-bike users, something like 50% of trips, have replaced car trips. This is because they enable longer journeys, but also e-bikes have broader appeal to a range of people, you know, older people, women, people who are unfit or have got other health problems can use an e-bike whereas previously they wouldn't have been able to cycle. So it really opens up, it's a real game changer for increasing cycling. And some work done by what's called the propensity to cycle tool. This is some modelling which looks at the different scenarios and what the potential for cycling is. And if you look at the scenario for e-bikes for Derbyshire, it shows that around 20% of Derbyshire commuters overall could cycle to work with e-bikes if we had a Dutch-style infrastructure and if there was e-bikes as well. And as you can see from the map here, although it's 20% overall, you know, even in rural areas, it's still 10 to 14%. And in some areas like, you know, the centre of Derby, we're up to sort of levels of 30%. That's 30% of people cycling to work. That's a lot of cars we can take off the roads. And this is, this just gives you a little breakdown. But I can circulate these slides after. You don't need to sort of concentrate on the figures now. Public transport, as I mentioned before, it's a real challenge. People aren't using the buses, and all the surveys suggest people don't want to get back on buses either. But we think one of the suggestions we had to encourage people to use buses, and I think this would work very well with COVID, is to make them free. Already in over 100 towns across the world, local public transport is free. This is Dunkirk in France, which in autumn 2018 made all its buses free, and at the same time transformed its bus network. And 1 year later, bus trips were up 85%. Half of new bus users previously drove, and about 1 in 10 bus users had sold their second car. So this was a game changer for a working class town that was culturally very attached to its car. And this can work in this country as well. And we've estimated how much it would take to make bus transport free in England. And I've estimated in Derbyshire, we need about 25 million a year additional funding. Because don't forget, we already subsidise our bus services quite a lot already. So this is additional funding to make them free for everybody. So unfortunately, free local bus services wouldn't be feasible or affordable under the current deregulated, privatised bus system that we have in Britain. London's the only place in Britain with a regulated franchise bus system, and although Manchester was consulting on this before the lockdown. So this would be the right time to take back public control of some of the ailing bus services and make them into municipal bus services, so that any profits can be reinvested rather than leaking out to shareholders. Currently, some local authorities, mayoral combined authorities, they can regulate their bus services. As I said, Manchester was about to do that, so that you have a completely managed bus network with one timetable, one network and one ticket, instead of the uncoordinated, deregulated mess of a system that we've got at the moment. The law should be changed to allow all local authorities to be able to do this automatically. At the moment, though, Derbyshire could still request that from the Secretary of State if they wanted to do that. The other advantage of having a regulated system is it makes it easier to introduce low or zero emission vehicles like this electric bus system in York. So the problem is that once the lockdown is lifted, the likelihood is that road traffic is going to rebound quite significantly. And it may be even higher than before if people are avoiding public transport. But even before this, we propose that road transport needs to be constrained within carbon budgets, but we can lock in some of the positive trends that we've seen recently, such as remote working. So to do this, we proposed a pay-per-mile eco-levy for driving. So this is a form of road pricing. This will reduce carbon, air pollution, congestion, and many of the other negative impacts of road traffic, while generating significant revenue for investment. So a pay-per-mile eco-levy, as it suggests, would be distance-based, but there would be lower rates for people with electric vehicles, or there'd be lower rates in rural areas where there are fewer alternatives to driving. So we know from experience from cities that have introduced road pricing, such as congestion charging in London, Milan, Gothenburg, Singapore, Stockholm, that road charging or road pricing is a really effective way of cutting car use. And all local authorities currently have the powers to introduce road pricing. If Derbyshire wanted to, they could introduce road pricing. The problem is political will. So other than London and Nottingham, which introduced its workplace parking levy a few years ago, which has been very successful, no other local authority has had the courage to do this. But if you can show that the income from a levy can be ring-fenced and reinvested in public services and reduce carbon and air pollution, we think many people will support it. And the people who benefit most from road pricing, as studies in London and other cities have shown, are the people that we clap for every Thursday. It's low-income workers, it's women, it's young people, and it's also older people. And we've estimated that an eco-levy across the UK would generate as much as £20 billion a year. And that could provide badly needed revenue in a lot of hard-pressed areas, and would level up some of those areas, which is a current government aim. That would provide green investment in towns and cities that have suffered the worst cuts in recent years. So here's a summary of our recommendations. Transfer the budget from road building to local authorities for long-term funding for sustainable transport. Make local public transport fare free. Bring rail and buses under public control with an objective of reducing carbon. Change the law to allow automatically all local authorities to franchise their bus network. Build a strategic cycle network alongside all main roads. Provide government grants for purchase of e-bikes, and bring in a pay per mile eco levy for driving, which would raise significant sums. And just to finish up, all the ideas presented here today, they felt quite radical when we presented these about 18 months or a year ago, but now they seem less radical in relation to COVID. But they're all being implemented in other countries or in other towns and cities. They're all very achievable with the right political will. And they have other benefits. We can get cleaner air, we can get improved health, quieter streets, more convivial neighbourhoods, a better local economy, and a fairer public transport system. And I think one thing that we've learned from the current crisis is that the public appetite for radical measures is perhaps much greater than we ever thought before this crisis. So I apologise, that's rather a fast run through of a lot of big ideas there, but I will pass over to Dave now, who's going to talk more about some practical local measures that councils can be doing now, and then we'll have questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. That's great. Yeah. So Dave, if you want to move on to, and I don't know if you want to keep the slides up, or we can see each other again.
No, go back. Go on, Lisa.
Yeah, no, take the slides away. I think it's better.
Yeah. You just click stop sharing screen, or I don't know.
Oh, stop sharing. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Okay.
So first of all, both from an organisational point of view, I mean, I've been heavily involved with Derby Cycling Group, as well as obviously my day job working for Sustrans, and what Lisa has outlined is absolutely at the heart of what certainly those two organisations both believe and want to see happen. What I think we need to bear in mind is right the way through Lisa's presentation is that very core idea of political will and of a change of culture, because without that political will and without that change in culture, we are going to struggle to move this agenda forwards, because that is the roadmap. We can see what we need to do, but we need to take people with us on that journey. And that is the nub. That's what we've really, really got to crack at some point. And that is the real challenge. So I'm going to start with where we are now, because I think that this does create that opportunity to start to have those discussions and to start to maybe engage people in that conversation and to start to move that forwards. You know, we do need to be a little bit careful, because the current situation has created, yes, an appetite for change, but it's an appetite for change within a particular bubble. And I think it's worrying. We just got to be careful about extrapolating that outside of when this bubble finishes, when the current crisis ends, because I think there may also be a huge appetite to go back to the old normal, because people are going to want to feel that security. So I think we just need to build on what we've got. And what we've built on, so for example, some of the local actions that have happened and are really positive and exciting are things like, both in, well, certainly in my region, in the East Midlands, we've seen a real acknowledgement of the role of walking and cycling in terms of boosting your immune system, keeping you healthy. That helps you to actually deal with the virus. It's also, of course, improved air quality. And if you are experiencing, if you have got a respiratory illness like COVID-19, then having improved air quality is a major benefit to you. So these are really strong arguments that we can start to use. What we've seen is bike shops being classified as an essential service. You know, that recognition is so, so important, that bike shops are being kept open. In some cities, they're being paid to be kept open. that there are now a burgeoning number of projects across the region and across the UK, in Derby, in Leicester, and in Nottingham, providing cycles for key essential staff to actually be able to get to work. That you are now starting to see the role of bike recycling projects suddenly having a major focus. Also, the fact that we are now seeing a lot of bike shops are actually very, very busy. And they're very busy because people are going and having their bikes fixed. So these are real positives. I am, though, going to now look at the thing that's been much more of a struggle. And that is using this opportunity to reallocate road space at this time, because we have got a significant reduction in road traffic, at least cuts of about 60%. It does seem that we've had an increase in road speed, which is concerning because of the loss of that road traffic. But what we've got to do is to actually start to use this reduced amount of cars on the road to reallocate road space. Now, if you look at Leicester City Council has, on Monday, it reallocated 0.5 kilometre of a triple carriageway and took one carriageway completely out, just put some cones down, used what's called an emergency traffic regulation order. Suddenly you've got a bike lane. They're about to do that today on Saffron Lane as well. So it is possible. What sets Leicester apart is that key thing of political will and a culture that has been developed over decades in that city that is pro walking and cycling. They have, for example, a directly elected mayor in Peter Soulsby, who in the 1980s started their cycle campaign group. This is why if you go to Leicester, you will see significant changes, significant amounts of segregated space for cyclists in the city centre. However, we should be arguing for this in our cities and towns right now. There's no reason why it can't happen. Unfortunately, we are also battling. There is sometimes with a small c, a conservative culture within our local authorities, okay, about moving away from a car-based transport system towards walking, cycling, and public transport. Okay, Greg, can you just keep an eye on how long I've been talking for? Because I have a habit of just rattling on for ages. How long have I been?
Fine, yeah.
Okay.
Do you want another 5 minutes?
I was going to do 5 minutes in total.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
So some of the other things I just wanted to quickly talk about is, it is really important. I was talking to somebody who was very senior within Cycling UK, the old CTC, based in the West Midlands, heavily involved as a senior manager within public health, okay? Heavily involved with organising cycle campaign groups in the West Midlands. He's not ever going to use public transport again, okay? He won't use public transport again, and we have a massive issue with that. I agree that looking at pricing for public transport is an option, but I think that we have to look at that very seriously, particularly around the road space reallocation argument, because we need to make sure that when we're reallocating road space, it's not detrimental to public transport, but also how public transport is going to get people on board. And I think some of that is going to have to be spacing. You're going to have more space in trains. You can't do what I do, which is get on a train going into Birmingham and actually have people queuing all the way down the carriageway. People are not going to do that for a number of years to come. Home working is also going to be part of the solution, but it's only a solution for a small number of people. For a huge number of people, there is a massive mental health issue. Just to very quickly look at some of the practical work that it is possible to do. I think that, and Sustrans works around the idea of using the idea of temporary interventions to actually take people on a journey where you might temporarily block off a street and allow filtered permeability, where you might actually close a road outside of a school so that people get used to the idea, they suddenly like it, because one of the difficulties we've got is in the current situation, we're going to find engagement and consultation difficult. For me, I love the idea of just bloody going doing it anyway. You know, Leicester have not done consultation on this closed section of road that they've done near the Tigers ground, but it is temporary. It is literally only cones. People get used to it, they like it, they see the benefits, they want it to be made permanent. So I think that we have to look at making those sorts of arguments as well. We need to look at the idea of reimagining what our neighbourhoods look like, so that we have the idea of 20-minute walking neighbourhoods, so that people can access the services they need without having to drive. And that is about investing in and ensuring that those services are available within those local communities. I think that Lisa made a really interesting point about when London put in their congestion charge. I mean, one of the statistics, and Lisa, you'll come back to me, is there was a significant drop-off in traffic within that congestion zone in the first few years. However, it's a bit like increasing the price of cigarettes, is that the use of cigarettes goes down initially, and in those first 4 years, you had a huge drop-off, but there has been a slow creep back up. I don't think it's gone back up to the previous levels. So we do need to actually look at physical restrictions as well on people's ability to drive into places. And what we saw in Derby, and this is going back to my initial point and what I want to finish on, is this idea of political will and culture. Is that democracy is a wonderful thing. It's given us huge freedom. It also allows for, in a sense, a tyranny of the majority, whereby when we put to the voters of Derby a radical plan to introduce a congestion charge in Derby, not only was it unpopular, but the party that put that proposal forwards lost control of the council. And it went to an alternative party. That's the sort of challenge that we've got to overcome, because if you can't win it through a democratic process, if you can't bring it forwards, how do we actually bring about the change that we desperately, desperately need, that Lisa has so eloquently outlined? Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, both Lisa and Dave, for those really great contributions. Really, lots of things to think about, I'm sure. So we can start the discussion now. So what we're doing is, if you'd like to speak, you can write the word hat into the chat box, and I'll be taking orders, but taking it in order of that, basically. The lady from CPRE, if you really want to cut in at any point, no, you can't chat very easily on the phone. You can shout, and I'll shout your name, and I'll write your name down. Yeah. So I'm going to start with Tracy Conroy as starting off. She was first to type hat. So over to Tracy.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to talk about the change that in people's attitude toward things now. I think that people might be more receptive to things now because of social distancing, and I just wondered if it was time to get more councils together and perhaps hold a call like this sort of thing and talk about things that they can do, put it into give them examples and put it into their minds, really, what they might be able to do, because perhaps not as, thought about as many options as you have, Lisa, on your information. And I know down at Unston, where I live, the people that live around there, they were very against this bike trail that we've proposed, but now part of it's been built around the Peak Resort, and I went down myself on the bike, and it's absolutely full of people from that area walking and cycling on it. So I think it may have changed people's minds about cycling in that area, because there's so many people now using it that probably didn't think about using it before. So I think it's a really good time to put these things out to people and to give them a chance to mull it over and think about it, and perhaps they'll be more receptive to it.
Okay, thanks for that, Tracy. Move on to Graham.
It's a very quick one, really, for Lisa. Have you come across any examples of bikes, buses, trains being successfully integrated? one of the issues, it seems to me, is sometimes getting to a train station, for example, and still wanting a bike at the other end, or getting somewhere a little bit further distance where you need to do part of the journey by bike and part of it by bus. Have you any examples of that that you can point us towards? Thank you.
Do you want me to deal with that? Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, Graham, trains was one thing we didn't look at, but I know that is a huge issue, the integration. But I think once, you know, if a local authority can regulate its bus service, it makes integration that much easier, I think, because you can plan one timetable for all your different, you know, types of public transport. I mean, I know there are people on the call that have got more expertise than I have on trains, and Dave might have more information on bikes and buses. I know some countries, I mean, obviously on the continent, they do it way better than we do. I mean, we're quite appalling at integrating bikes with buses and trains, frankly, but sorry, I don't have any specific examples.
Okay, that's okay. So I had Sarah Roberts next to contribute onto this.
Hi everyone, thank you for the great presentations. Dave, I loved your examples of actually we've got a moment here, haven't we, where everything's so sort of messed up and different. It's really hard to do any consultation, and you don't need to do it if it's temporary. So, you know, my partner works for Sheffield City Council, and, you know, that's another council that finds it really difficult to take this kind of action. So building on the previous comment, which was, well, actually, there's some great examples now in Leicester. Can you provide a sort of set and could we get a set of those people who've actually done it in their locality recently, just to provide those examples that either people who work for councils can use to start generating that political will, or as the previous speaker said, could we actually set up a webinar with, you know, the transport planners or the people who make the decisions in our local areas to show what is possible. I think, you know, we should be we're trying to move now, because then as people get used to it, while things are all crazy, it doesn't have to go back to normal afterwards, does it? Thank you.
Just very quickly, Sarah, I'm actually speaking with Leicester City Council this afternoon at 2 o'clock. They've actually had 14, well, this was as of 2 days ago, they'd had 14 local authorities contact them.
Brilliant.
Yeah, to actually ask them about what they'd been doing and how they'd done it. What was particularly positive was that I was on a call with another local major city local authority key officer, and who had been quite skeptical about road space reallocation. And I have to say, most of the local authorities I've directly contacted on it have been skeptical. What they tend to be is very conservative with a small c. They don't want to be the first, but suddenly when a city like Leicester steps forwards, and there you can actually see a practical example. I'll put it to Andy this afternoon. I'll find out whether Sheffield have approached them, but I think it would be, I mean, there are a lot of people out there. It's Lisa and I were talking about it, this sort of tactical urbanism has become a new buzzword within the sort of active travel and transport sector at the moment. So I will have a natter with Andy and see what we can do, and I'll get back to Greg and Lisa with some information.
And brilliant. And maybe if there's a killer couple of slides that just show what's happening right now. I'll
send the press release. I can send. I don't know if brilliant. Lisa, you've got images from. Did you say you'd got images from Leicester? Because I've certainly got images from Leicester.
Yeah, Alistair has sent me a fantastic image of Leicester, so we can circulate that.
We'll start with our local parish councils as well. Well, they're quite conservative with a small c as well.
They're not obviously. So the one thing is, they're not obviously the Highways Authority. So that's who you have to engage with. You have to. So you'd have to work with Derbyshire, who are the highway, and that's the problem with multi-tiered government. Is that it's in a unitary, it will be the unitary authority, but in a county, it will be the county council rather than a parish or district.
Okay, great. We'll work on those as well. Thanks, Dave.
Right. Thanks a lot for that. So Marianne, you wanted to come in next?
I've unmuted, okay? Yeah. I wanted to just bring in the issue of political will. And I've just been finishing the book by Rebecca Willis, Too Hot to Handle. And that's where she's actually giving all of the evidence for how more deliberative democracy will open up all sorts of areas like this, where we're all on board. We found out how necessary it is to make these changes. And then we're up against the politicians and the feeling that, oh, the public will never buy that. And we now have quite a bit of evidence of how effective it can be to have deliberative citizens' assemblies where random selection of people come together, are brought together. They have discussions with experts, and then they discuss the various options, and they can come up with, they actually begin to see how much more sensible. And it does get the politicians on board because they realize that there is more popular support for these things than they thought. So much of the opposition is a knee-jerk reaction. That's all. I just wanted to bring that in because I just nearly finished it, and I've been so impressed with it. And how much, she's saying you've got all these people who've come up with marvelous policies, and then you've got all these politicians who don't want to know. And how do you bring that together?
Great. Maybe if you could type the name of the book, who it's by, in the chat, so that people, we've got that on record as well.
Yeah.
That'd be really useful. So next I had was Hardy and Lucy, who wanted to join in on this.
Yeah, so I have a question for both really, and that is, what is the one or two meaningful things that an individual can do to help bring about the road reallocation and other measures?
Lisa, do you want to?
I think responding to, well, I think campaigning locally and maybe contacting your MP would be really useful, because that's a very effective way of getting direct to the sort of political thing. And as a group, responding to DFT's decarbonisation plan as well, feeding into that. But yes, I think just voicing, I think the more voices that can be heard, and there's a growing chorus of people out there including the AA saying we shouldn't be spending 27 billion on roads. I think, and the Committee on Climate Change. So the more that this message gets out there, I think the harder DFT will be able to defend it, and hopefully they'll lose their legal challenge as well.
Yeah, to back up that, I'd say that the moment is now, that we need to be putting pressures on councillors, local authorities. Now, we need to do it sensitively. A lot of council staff have been reallocated and working from home. Some of them have been redeployed. So there is that aspect of it. But the moment is now to reallocate road space because there are so few cars on the road. So one suggestion I've put forwards is, for example, the dual carriageway leading along Uttoxeter to New Road in Derby to the Derby Royal Hospital is a dual carriageway. You could actually turn that down to a single carriageway, so that actually that would become a safe route for people who are walking and cycling to the Derby Royal. So you've got that emotional side. Normanton Road in Derby, is, if you pedestrianise that, if you could temporarily pedestrianise that, suddenly people could go shopping and socially distance from each other, because at the moment it would be chaotic. So it's using that, and I think the campaigning has to happen partly through your local councillors and through contacting officers and trying to push for the opportunity to have open discussion with them. And I know that the two of you are fully aware at the frustration of some of us that the opportunity to talk about active travel with Derby City Council through their active travel forum has recently been cancelled, which is just not good enough. So we need to pick that up and run with that and say, we need the forums, we need to be talking to councillors, we need to be talking to officers, we need those cones on these streets now, and it can be done with emergency TROs, traffic regulation orders, which can become experimental traffic regulation orders, which in time potentially can become permanent reallocation of road space. the time is now.
Definitely. That's great. Brilliant. Thanks for that, Dave. That's great. James Thatcher, I want to bring you in next. You were next on the list.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, I think basically I agree with a lot of things Dave has been saying, that this is a good time to start getting your local community to think about what you can do locally to make sure that the positive things that have happened to transport during this time of lockdown, people see those. I agree with Dave that I would always have a cautionary voice that I think actually people will want to bounce back to their old normal after this, that they'll be desperate to get out and see their friends and family, and that they'll want to get in their cars and travel to see those people. We quickly forget about things, or we forget about the positives that we might have had during these times. So we shouldn't delude ourselves that suddenly everyone's going to change their attitudes once lockdown is removed. It's more that this is a good time to get people to see what has been good. So the fact that I think the increased cycling we've been seeing has been mostly leisure-based, rather than what I would class as active travel, which is replacing a car journey to go to work or to go to the shops or whatever. From what I've seen, especially with families cycling, it's been more leisure-based, and that's probably because they have more time with schools not being on. There's no after-schools clubs running, you know, so that's something that when these things start to reopen, I wonder if that will quickly drop back down. But so two things I would say that we could focus on encouraging. Oh, can you still hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Two things I would say that we could get people to focus on as positives that have come out of this is people have been forced to live more locally and think about what there is in their local area that they can do. And when you think and live more locally, it's easier to walk and cycle to do those things. So getting people to think about if they've enjoyed living more locally. And then also people have been forced to use their time on more personal or family activities. So rather than going out to go to a gym or to drive to football practice with their children or whatever, they've just gone for a walk or gone for a bike ride, and maybe they've enjoyed that just as much. And maybe they might think, well, you know, do I need to spend the money to go to that club when we actually enjoyed going for a walk in the evening just as much? So I think that actually before those things become open to them again is the time to help people realize about that.
Yeah, definitely. John Beardmore, do you want to come in? Unmute yourself.
Yes, a couple of comments on this question of pricing and financial incentives, really. I did put something in chat about this, and my sort of comment was that if you have a levy that discriminates to some extent against people on low incomes, to which Lisa's response is, well, you have to have the public transport in place first. And I agree that especially if you can get free public transport, that would be enormously powerful. I suppose my concern is that's a very town-centred solution. It seems to me that public transport works best where you're going in and out of cities or going around and around cities, but it doesn't work terribly well for the sort of general case route if you want to get from, for the sake of argument, Stanley Common to Knifeton with a load of heavy tools. Public transport is not really your friend. And I think you have to allow that, you know, some people are going to need cars for that sort of work. It seemed to me that if you were wanting some sort of incentive, maybe you, rather than charging sort of amount per mile depending on type of vehicle, you might just ration mileage. That way you give people a sort of allocation of miles they can drive regardless of how much wealth they have. If you're going to have some sort of infrastructure for measuring either what people are doing in town or in general mileage, does anybody have a figure for what the London congestion charging scheme infrastructure cost? Because I seem to recall it was a phenomenal amount, and to me that seemed to be not a great use of money, really. It may be possible these days to do something better with tracking and GPS and so on, but I don't really feel that the cost of the sort of infrastructure they got in London, if it was put into every city, would be great news. The other approach I suppose I was keen to get people to think about was just sticking a carbon tax on fuel, because if one of our big drivers for this is carbon and air pollution, if we stick a tax on fuel, which is basically a carbon tax, that'll penalise people leaving their engines on while they're queuing. It'll penalise people in unnecessarily big cars, and it'll encourage people perhaps not to be driving on roads at times in rush hour traffic. So I think there's a few things there that need to be thought through. I think we need perhaps to consider things other than this mindset of just getting in and out of town. Anyway, that's a few things to think about as much as anything else.
Thanks, John. I next had Steve Martin on the list. If you want to come in, Steve.
Thanks, Greg. I think both presentations raise some wonderful opportunities for us to think about and how we as a group might engage with that process. But I'd like to focus on what Mary Ann has said, because she is talking about something that I ideally believe will cut across this issue of the political will and the culture change. Because the more that we can engage with the wider public through a deliberative process of change, I mean, Lisa's mentioned it, we're talking about transformational change. This is very difficult for the mass majority of us to actually even contemplate, never mind agree to, from a political and cultural perspective, albeit we're going through that process now as a result of COVID-19. Now, I would just like to say that there is a good example of this process, and it is Leeds City Council who have done one of these deliberative processes, and top of their list in terms of the transport was they're not going to allow any further expansion of Leeds Airport. And I thought, you know, that's a big decision for a local authority that's into economic growth and all the other unsustainable practices of our economy. So very much would say that we as a group should be tapping on the doors or speaking to our MPs and speaking to our local authority about where is the deliberative process if they want change to happen. Whatever their political persuasion, that's the route to buy in more participation and more reasonable acceptance on a cultural scale from a wider populace. That's my thank you, Mary, for raising it. And Rebecca Willis is very, very smart.
Thanks for that. I noticed Tracy had a hat, but because you've already spoken, I want to kind of give it to other people who hadn't said anything yet. So I wanted Peter Robinson. I want to bring Peter in and see if he can speak on this. You're muted, Peter. I'll hang on. I'll just I'm not the host anymore, so I can't unmute. You have to unmute yourself.
Hi,
there you go.
Sorry about that. I want to go back to Stephen's point and other people's point about transformation. A transformation of enormous scale is happening, and I think it's happening with people that we don't talk to. The people are opening up their ideas. I know that the politicians, I know the person down the road is talking about things that they never talked before, and I think it's really important that we get into them now to try to have conversations one way or another. And it's very good, but emailing, Zooming, trying to talk to the councillors, and it doesn't matter particularly which angles. Obviously the transport is a fantastic wedge, but talking about the economics and the new economics is part of that diet. So I really urge that people try to talk to the councillors to try to just to inject our ideas in the thinking that's going on at the moment. Just one other thing in terms of the council. This is Derby City Council. it wasn't to set up a transport subgroup of the climate working group, and I'm trying to get that going. And so it's quite possible in the near future I'll be able to put out the invite to the active travel people and all the others to help form the transport dimension of our discussions. But there's a lot of glitches and politics going on there. So, but I'm hoping. And just one final thing, Greg maybe and others, what should our next topic be of discussion?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so if people want to write, like, in terms of the topic thing, if people want to sort of can use the chat to kind of talk about this kind of thing. But Jim was next on the list, so I'm gonna let Jim speak next.
Hello, a few points to pick up on from during the discussion. The first one really is that talking about increasing congestion, a lot of that is vans now rather than cars, I think. Both deliveries that we're suddenly getting a lot more of, and also in general, and I think that's probably the case in central London, where if you need to take stuff in, you drive in a van. Onto buses, there are certainly going to be short-term problems, particularly in the near future, where people start going back to work. So the morning peak buses will be busy, but people like myself will still be left at home. So the off-peak services are going to be very low. I think there's going to be a lot less there, and that's going to be really difficult. That might be a way where private operators can no longer afford to run in the model that we've had, and there may be everybody in the industry will be looking for alternative models. Certainly the way pensioner travel is funded has been very poor, and it's a big problem. Regarding Greater Manchester's franchising, having been to a meeting over there, I think that they have gone about it completely the wrong way, and they seem to have gone out of their way to get everybody's backs up. The other one is a question for Lisa, really, is that does she have any links to information about success of free bus services? Because I don't think they're all in other countries. I'd be interested if she has.
Lisa, do you want to answer that?
Lisa, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly, obviously I'll circulate the presentation, but I'll also put a link to our 9 briefing paper, because there's a lot more information in there with details on, for example, free public transport, the ins and outs of eco pricing and things like that. So I'll circulate that after the meeting.
Thanks, Lisa.
Great.
That's it.
Alison, do you want to come in?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Very good presentations. Thank you, Lisa and David. I'd like to pick up the idea about Zoom meetings or contacting councillors. I wonder whether we could hold something like we're holding now, a Zoom meeting, and invite councillors along to it. And not just Derby and Derbyshire, we could invite Leicester, all the local Midlands politicians, whether they're MPs or local councillors, and any other interested parties, but do it like we've done today with relevant presentations, and then create a discussion afterwards with the relevant councillors, etc. Just a thought.
Yeah, it's definitely a good suggestion, because I know the Derbyshire Climate Coalition meeting that we were going to be having, and we were inviting councillors to those meetings. So I don't see why we can't invite councillors to kind of join in these discussions that we're having, because I think it is definitely relevant to them at the minute. So yeah, I definitely agree. But yeah, I know Tracy wanted to come back. I don't know if anyone wants, we haven't had any more hats in the chat. I know if you haven't spoken yet and want to say anything, if you, because we did say this event was until 12:15, so we want to sort of, we just want to sort of see where we're at in terms of time. We might run over very, very slightly. But we don't want to run over too much on this. But we do want to kind of keep up these conversations happening every Friday, ideally. I know Transition Buxton are going to be doing sort of conversations as well in the evening. I think the next one's on the next Thursday on the 7th. So they're going to be sort of doing discussions as well. But we do want to kind of keep these discussions up as well for the Climate Coalition, for Derbyshire Climate Coalition. So if you do have any ideas, food security is a good one. But just let Peter know, and we can sort something out around that. So Laura, I want to get you in next.
Just a real quickie, via Steve, who has got a contact from Sarah Dines, her Sarah Dines MP for Derbyshire Dales is now doing Zoom surgeries, apparently. So I managed to, via his contact with her, I don't know if she was like a secretary or a helper or just, I don't know, because was she located here or in London? Either way. So there's someone to contact. So we could now make arrangements to speak to her via Zoom, just having these surgeries, and force the issue a bit, because she's been very evasive, but this deliberative process required for getting things moving, all these are things that people have talked about, emergency traffic regulation orders, all the notes we've made about, just, if various people get in there and repeat the same things, she'll think, oh, gosh. So that's that. Sarah Dines, who no one has seen.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that. It's really useful. And Tony and Kathy, if you want to come in.
Hello. Yes. Thanks. I just want to share a little bit of my experience lately. I've been working from home recently. Been working from home recently, and I look out over a busy road. And I've been amazed at the number of people walking and cycling around the street, and including families riding on the road. And that's quite interesting, because obviously you tend to think that people with children would tend to want the children to ride on the pavement these days. And I think the major thing that's caused that is that there are fewer cars around, and that seems to be enabling more people to cycle, certainly. And that's obviously my area of interest. More routes would also enable more cycling as well, and therefore I think that these two things show that we do need some sort of action now to try to enable people to keep on riding, and turn some of those leisure journeys that James was talking about into everyday journeys. But the trick is, how do we engage with the people who want to cycle, who want to walk more? They're out there, and I think, as well as the political will, it's getting to these. How do we get to the people who would like to do more active travel and bring them into the area of the conversation, really, and get them to help us put pressure on the politicians to enable them to do it. And that was it.
Thanks for this. I do know that councils are going to be starting to hold online meetings, because from what I got told from my local Chesterfield Borough Councillor, was that the government's now given permission for local councils to run online meetings via online, and for the public to join that. And I don't know how they're going to work that out or not, but obviously that is something that we need to be looking out for in terms of our local councils holding these online meetings, and we should definitely utilise these to try and influence some decisions. So we just need to kind of keep our eyes out to sort of see what happens in terms of meetings going online. And so, Maurice, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just quickly on the meetings. My council has been allegedly working on this for some time now. As you'd expect, they are finding the IT challenge quite difficult, but you're right, we are in the process of trying to set up formal full council meetings and committee meetings, which should have public access. So I'm expecting the more switched on councils in Derbyshire, whoever they are, district or borough or county, to be able to do that. And as we've said, that's an opportunity to bring up these issues in that context.
Great, yeah, thanks for that. So I haven't had any more hats in the chat. I don't know if any of the people on the phone wanted to call to quickly use this opportunity before the end of the meeting to say anything. The two people on the phone, I don't know if you wanted to say anything. I'll unmute you both if you want to say anything now.
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Okay. And Alan, did you want to say anything? No, I don't know. That was the other person on the phone, but that's fine if necessary. We've literally just got a couple more minutes, so if you can really keep it really brief. So Steve, if you want to say something, and I think Tracy wants to come back in as well. Tracy, do you want to say something very, very quickly?
I'll say something very quickly, Greg.
Okay, yeah.
For Derbyshire Dales people, I've just heard literally last night that the District Council have just appointed an international consultancy called Clear Lead Consulting to advise them on their climate emergency process. And that's a significant step for a very small district council, but I think we need to watch that space and also begin to ask the question, how can we connect with that process and the consultation that they will undertake with these experts? Because it seems to me some local input to that process, again, repeating some of what I said before, beginning a deliberative process with all the experts who are actually going to inform the decision makers.
Yeah. Tracy, did you want to say something very quickly? Because I know you put another hat in the chat.
I just wanted to ask about some information that we could share perhaps to people, some examples and putting these ideas into people's heads sort of thing. If someone could perhaps provide some material that we could send on Facebook or Instagram or something like that, and just get like a conversation going, because people are going to be thinking about the practicalities of going out after this lockdown's finished and how they're going to do it, aren't they? So it's something that's going to be relevant now. So if we could do that now, it'd be a good idea to get people thinking about it. That was all I wanted to say.
Definitely, and we'll make sure the kind of Dave shared some links. Lisa's got some links as well. So when we circulate Lisa's presentation, we can include on there some links and things. So if you can, we can kind of get some links. If anyone's got any links, you can either post them in the chat, and this chat is going to be saved and sent to everyone anyway, because we've got a recording of it. So all the links that's been shared on here, it will be all available again as a recording. So you will be able to get access to that. We'll kind of make sure Lisa and Dave can kind of share any links as well, and I'll bring Dave in at this point.
Very quickly, I just wanted to say that something that we've been talking about and working on within Sustrans, but this call has absolutely helped me to crystallise what that's going to take place is, and particularly following on from Alison's comment, I'm going to go back to Leicester City today when I'm talking to them. In fact, I'm going to try and ring Andy immediately after this call, and we're going to take forwards the idea of Leicester working with us to set up a meeting which we can then publicise to all local authorities, both in this region and across the UK, where they can actually learn about how the process, because you have to, it's giving confidence to other officers. I know we're all talking about talking to councillors, but actually it's the culture within the officer corps that often is very, very conservative with a small c. They don't want to take risks. But if they can see and learn from Leicester, so thank you very much, because this call has helped me to go, so we've been talking about it, but this has crystallised it, so brilliant.
Thanks, Dave, that's really good to hear. Yeah, brilliant. And Lisa, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just really quickly, just to say, this is a huge topic. It's very wide ranging, quite controversial, and just thank you so much for all the great questions and contributions. I mean, there's I can't really summarize, but there's a whole area about extra information ideas, and there's another area about political will and influencing the decision making process. And I think those are both really important, and we will sort of try and help those as much as possible.
Great. Alison, did you have something very, very quickly? Because we need to really wrap up this meeting. So
yes, very quick. I just want to make sure everybody knows there is a crowdfunding appeal to fund the legal challenge for the road schemes with the government. And maybe Lisa could send a link with all her other links, please.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely, when Lisa shares her presentation, we'll also put that link in as well. I think that's really important. So I think that's the end. Unless I always sort of say like Peter should always have the last word, but he never likes it. I don't know if you want to say anything, Peter, or not. But you're welcome to if you want to, because yeah.
I just want to say thank you, and the Google discussion group's important as a way of us to talk in between and to work out what the next topic is and stuff like that. And just one last, I'm sorry, I hate sounding like a preacher, but we know that people are shaking up their ideas enormously now. They are rethinking their lives in a way that they haven't done since the Second World War. And we've got to be out somehow either articulating to them and talking to them and trying to get them to change direction, so that when we come out of this, we go into a new normal, not the old normal. But thank you.
No worries. Well, thanks so much for everyone for coming, and we'll be in touch on the email on the mailing list. Like I said, if you're not on there, then you can get in touch with me or Peter. But if you want to send me your if you're not on the Google group, if you want to either send me or Peter your email address, and we'll make sure you can either join the Google group online, or it's via you can get an email when anyone posts on the Google group as well. So if you're not on that Google group, send us your email address, and we'll make sure you get all the links. So just send me your email, and we'll make sure you get everything. So thank you so much for everyone for joining. Have a good rest of the Friday, and enjoy your weekend, and look forward to speaking to you soon. So thanks for everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Brilliant.
Right.
Yeah, I'm thinking me up now. Yeah, I'm just coming out.
Great. Another good meeting, I think.
Yeah, it was great. And hello, Zizi. It's the first time I've seen your face. So
I turned off my video because the sound was becoming unstable, and I thought I might hear a bit better with less traffic in both directions. I was trying to see if I could save the chat, which